all for coming out. I want to welcome you to our 2023 panel discussion. I'm hopeful that tonight is enjoyable and it's educational for each of us, and maybe next year we can approach another topic. So I want to just give you guys a little idea of how we got to where we are. So about November of last year, the buzz became large language models, AI, things like that. And we all know that AI has been around for a very long time. So what's different, what's new, that's what we're hoping to explore tonight. But as educators, we begin conversating and talking about what does this look like in the classroom? How are we to rightly use this as educators? How are we as Christians to rightly think about the use of this new tool? And in visiting with some of my fellow teachers, finding out that they were already experiencing the use of this in the classroom by their students, and they were just wrestling with how to deal with that appropriately. Talking with a lot of our DFW area private schools, administrators, counselors, they also were already beginning to have these conversations and think through, what does this look like? So the idea came to, let's talk about it. If we don't know how we should be thinking, and let's talk about it. So I approached Matt about it, and I asked him if he would help me, and he graciously said he would. So I'm grateful for him. He's going to be moderating tonight, and I'll introduce him in a little bit, but I just wanted to thank him for thought processes and just all the help in helping me make this be successful. And just a couple other thank yous. KCOC, which is Kaufman Church of Christ, and Doug Page, when I thank them for letting us use their facility. Ours is being used tonight. Of course, a lot of our schools are doing orientations and things like that. So ours are being used tonight. So they graciously let us come. They also set the chairs up for us, and they've just been really generous in allowing us to come and be here. So we want to make sure that we thank them. And we want to thank you guys for taking time out of your week to be here and be a part of this and to participate for us. And then I have one last thank you for Jared Harris, because all of this would not be happening technology-wise. This AI conversation about technology would not be happening live stream or any of that good stuff if it wasn't for him. So he figured out how to do that for us, how to help me just get it set up, and I just want to thank him for always being able to help me taking my crazy visions and making them come to life. So I just appreciate him. And then I'm going to move into a moment of introducing to you our panelists, and then also just thanking them for being here, for taking the time out of their schedule as well. Several of them are teachers who have school starting coming up either this week, next week. So we just thank them for their time, their thought processes, the engaging conversation that they've already given and that they will give. So thank you guys for being a part of this. And so I'm going to start with our introductions, just let you know who we have up here. So here in the second chair from me, this is Dr. John C. Dyer, and he is the Vice President of Enrollment Services and Educational Technologies, as well as an Assistant Professor of Theological Studies at Dallas Theological Seminary. So he joined us. He was one of the original ones that Matt and I kind of talked through who might be a good fit to come and help us, and I reached out to him, and he was gracious and was on board with the idea as soon as I presented it. So we are grateful to have you here tonight, and thank you for just being a part of it. The next one we have in the fourth chair for me is Jennifer Baker. Jennifer is the Instructional Technology Facilitator at Kaufman ISD, and then she is also a KCS parent, long-term KCS parent, and has 2 students who are in our KCS secondary program. So we're grateful to have you as well, and she loves all things related to this topic. So we're grateful to have her. In the middle, hot seat, is Amy Armstrong. She is an honors science instructor at Dallas First Baptist Academy, and she is one of my fellow educators that really just started helping me wrestle through what this idea looks like, and was sharing how it was already playing out in her classroom. And so I'm just grateful for her camaraderie and just being a colleague that will talk through hard things with me. So grateful for that. The far right over here, we have Bailey Treehern. Bailey, I have him listed as our tech expert. So that's what he's bringing to the table. So Bailey, as we were thinking through who would be good, we thought that it would be nice to have someone who has some technology expertise that's not specific to the education world, and that's one of the roles that Bailey fills for us. Tonight, he does have experience though. They homeschooled their children, so they do have some education experience as well. And then next to me here is Mr. Ethan Nichols. Ethan is a former KCS student and now currently is a junior at Wills Point ISD. And I was just super excited. I reached out to him and asked him if he would be a part of this, and he was over the top excited, and I knew he would be, and I'm just really grateful for him to be a part of it and share a student perspective as well as just share his thoughts. He's put time and research into this topic, so I'm excited. A couple of housekeeping things. We are live streaming and recording, and then to let you know, the program that you have that when you came in and also on the screen is a QR code that will allow you to record your attendance here tonight as well as submit questions to our panel. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and we want you guys to have the opportunity to submit questions if you already have them, or as new thought is generated through the night, you can also submit questions at that time, and I'll be in the back filtering through those, and we'll share some of those with our panelists when we get to that portion. So thank you all for coming, and I am going to turn it over. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who is moderating for us. He is the pastor at Country Bible Church, and then also a KCS parent and has a student that is in our Kaufman Christian School secondary program as well. So.
Thanks, Brandy. I'm so excited to be here. This is super fun. I'm so glad you all are all here tonight, and to everyone that's watching online as well. I'm glad that you have tuned in. It's really great to be here. Thank you so much to each of you for joining us tonight. I'm excited to talk to you and to hear from you tonight. I really just want to kind of confess maybe some of the same things that you're thinking about yourself. I don't know, my own kind of lack of understanding of artificial intelligence and how it relates to education. I am here to learn just as much as you are. I know very little, honestly, about the subject, but I do have questions, and I think that's what my role is going to be tonight, just to ask a whole lot of questions of these experts here. So I want to start out just briefly defining some of the terms that I think may come up that might help us a little bit in the conversation, and they're going to be free to correct me and say, no, those were terrible definitions. I'm going to do my best here to help give us a little way to start, and then kind of explain the need as well for the panel tonight, why we're here and why it's important. But artificial intelligence, some might say, is the ability of a computer or perhaps a robot controlled by one to do tasks that are usually done or have been traditionally done by humans, because those tasks have required human intelligence and discernment. And we would say that AIs can perform a wide variety of tasks, but not necessarily all of the ones a human can, but can match or exceed human performance in certain specific tasks. And I think we're seeing that more and more. IBM puts it this way, just ripped this off of their website. Artificial intelligence leverages computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. And so when it comes to what we're talking about educationally, I think that certainly is quite relevant to what we're talking about. Machine learning is another topic that may come up tonight. The method of training a computer to learn from its inputs, but without explicit programming for every circumstance. So machine learning helps a computer to achieve artificial intelligence. And research in AI in this area has focused on how computers learn and reason and solve problems and perceive and even use human language. So we'll be talking a little bit about that perhaps as it comes up. And then one more that Brandy referenced as well to begin with is the large language model. We're seeing that a little bit more when it comes to education. Learning a vast amount of text and then remembering the patterns and structures of language. We might see artificial intelligence doing that. Things like ChatGPT, we've talked about. It's a service that's trained on massive amounts of data from the internet, books, articles, websites, and it's trained to learn the relationships between words and phrases and sentences, and that allows it to generate coherent and contextually relevant responses once given a prompt or query. So those are some of the big deals, a lot of big jargon there, a lot of language, but hopefully it gives us an idea. Definitely AI's impact on our society is widely debated. That includes education, but it certainly is a pressing issue for educators. And there's a lot of kind of pros and cons to this, and people on a lot of sides of the debate. And we'll hopefully be able to hear some of those things tonight, kind of the ups and downs, the goods and bads. But you're not here to listen to me, so we want to hear from these experts here. I will be opening my questions first to the entire panel, so we'll see who's brave enough to jump in to answer some of these questions, and then I will probably move to some specific questions for each of you as we go through the night. We're going to kind of move from the general of AI to the specific. And it may happen that I move the conversation along here or there. Don't be alarmed. They all know, hey, the moderator's free to cut them off every once in a while. I'm not being mean. I'm just being kind to us all, so that may happen. But let's start it like this. What are some prevalent uses, panel, of artificial intelligence that our audience might know about already today?
Sure, I'll go for it. So the first ones I think of are things like Grammarly or autocorrect, which we use all the time. I mean, those are some of the earlier forms of AI. Social media, like the feeds where it'll automatically know that, you like Fritos chips, so all the flavors of Fritos show up, those predictive kind of things. Those are some basic AI that I think we just use all the time and don't even think about.
So if you've had laparoscopic or robotic surgery, AI is definitely involved in this situation to help doctors make better decisions and also control movements and things like that. Just being involved in the medical decisions that they make. Navigation, stuff like that. So as I thought about it, like surely Netflix, navigation for myself. And one of the most interesting facts I saw was in 1954, spell checker was one of the most discussed ideas about AI. Like it was revolutionary, and we just yeah, you better spell check my stuff.
The one that I think I use the most is the copier machine. Tells me where the jam is, and so I can get in there and fix it, and it walks me step by step on how to fix it. And when I told the teacher, I said, well, that's artificial intelligence, she looked at me and she's like, I feel like I've been taken advantage of by the copier machine. So, that one,
In many ways.
that's the one that I probably use the most.
Okay, we're all going to get a few. I'll say anti-lock brakes, right? So when you're sliding across and it can detect something and do something faster than you can to help you out. Or Google Maps, all that stuff. I got here, I'm from Irving, I have no idea where I am. But I got here, and I'll never be able to get back here, but I got here, because the robot tells me how to get here, so those are a couple of ones.
Well, you guys took all of mine, so I'll just go ahead and say Roomba is planning on releasing a vacuum that uses AI technology.
So you think it's fair to say then that there's a lot more use of artificial intelligence that people are using kind of in their daily lives than they even anticipate or even realize? Sure. Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, very good. What about, let's talk specifically then about schools, especially with Amy, Jennifer, kind of your experience there. What kind of AI might our schools be using?
Well, as Brandy said, I first trained into AI use when I assigned a paper in my biology class. And reading through these papers, which were a position paper on why creation theory has proven evolutionary theory wrong, I noticed several of my students had extremely well-written papers, contrary to what I typically see out of their work. And so that was when I found out that you can actually run it through an AI checker, and of course they came back as like 90% written by, AI. And that was kind of the first experience I'd had with students utilizing AI to do their work for them in a large-scale major project. So that is definitely one way that I have seen it used in school, kind of on the negative side. Now, as a teacher, learning to use ChatGPT to plan out lessons has been fantastic. So there's definitely positives to it too.
So we've seen pretty much the same. We're one-to-one Chromebook in Kaufman, so ChatGPT is actually blocked on their Chromebook, so they cannot use the AI generator, but they have found other things that they can use. Because Canva decided to go ahead and make it part of their educational package for them to have AI writing. So we just discovered that they're all using that. But I guess some of our teachers have taken a different approach on it because a lot of our kids are preparing for STAR EOC so they can graduate, and writing is a huge section of STAR EOC, so they have to be able to write. So we've seen a completely kind of shift in, instead of fighting against them, maybe teaching them more ways of why this is not going to help them in the long run. So yes, we're seeing it, but we did see a little bit of a shift there towards the end of the year where they were kind of like, oh, maybe this is not a good idea for me to use this, or maybe it's okay to use this, and then I need to take those ideas and rewrite it so that, so for the kids, we've kind of seen a little bit of a shift. I think it's got a long way to go. There's still plenty of them trying to cheat. Now the teachers, we have a huge selection of teachers that are using it for lesson planning. CurePod writes entire lesson plans and then gives them slide decks and all the things to use so they're ready to teach for a couple weeks. So there's tons. I mean, if you've been on TikTok, like that's all TikTok is teacher resources for AI. So our teachers are using it a lot.
So we will definitely, as we continue the discussion, some of what we'll talk about isn't all education related. Let's think also through just a little bit about teams in general. Or, outside of the school context, have you encountered different ways that teams are using artificial intelligence kind of on a daily basis? Maybe Ethan, Bailey, any of you guys maybe have addressed that before.
All right, looks like this is my forte. So yeah, for teens, AI has uses some less morally good than others. I've seen teens use AI as a means of entertainment purposes. Seeing if ChatGPT can create a new Tom Cruise movie script, or trying to use an AI art generator to maybe make Yoda do juggling or something. So entertainment purposes, very prevalent. Some other uses could be like maybe using AI chatbots as a means of research, which I'm not 100% that's okay, but stuff like that.
All right, so it's definitely in use quite a good bit, okay, by teams. Dr. Dyer, I'm interested to know, you and I were talking briefly before the panel tonight. You had mentioned just kind of how the discussion on technology seems to, it's always something new, something changes and there's something new to talk about. We've been, AI's been around for a long time. Bailey was talking about spell check before, but it's been around a long time. Why is it just now seeming to be kind of the cusp of us talking about it? Why has the conversation shifted to AI, you think?
Yeah, well, I'll give a fun definition of technology first,
Right.
just broadly.
Thank
Right?
you.
So it's the idea that technology is anything invented after you were born. Right, so everything before you were born is just stuff. That's the way the world works. Everything from 0 to 35 is the cool, amazing stuff you could build a career on. Everything that comes out after you're 35 is the destruction of our kids' minds. That's right. And so these things, they're just going a little faster these days. And so when it comes to this particular one, there's been a lot of generative tools for a while, but I really think last fall y'all heard ChatGPT. Just that idea that it was open to anybody and that you could kind of talk to it. And I think that's the part of it that really made it feel like it was human. And I think we all just said, wait a second, that's really interesting. And then all the image generation tools at the same time came out. So, like I said, you take a flight somewhere, 90% of that flight is AI. All these different things are AI driven. But once you could talk to it, I think it felt like, wait, this is something different. It's right here.
That's the cycle. Thank you, yes.
I think the other side of that is technology has kind of caught up to a point as well, to where we're seeing more advances into areas that we haven't thought about. So a lot of it has just been kind of basic steps. So Siri and stuff like that, this voice assistant that most people picked up fairly quickly after they got their phone, like it was just too easy to use. But then when we get to this thing that is more mimicking, and Siri was very quickly defeated. Like she's constantly telling me, I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't get it. Well, with ChatGPT, it does mimic in ways that brings to mind stuff like movies and all that kinds of stuff. And then just the technology has caught up to a point where we are going to see more advances, and that's both in hardware, like our computers and the things that they're using to make these things have caught up to a degree where we're able to do it much more efficiently. And the algorithms are getting to a point where they're much more efficient as well. So algorithm is basically a fancy word of knowing how to make choices. It's just yes, no choices, but it's fancy yes, no choices.
Bailey, as somebody who's been in the technology field for a long time, friends, colleagues in the same field, do you find that people in general are your friends or colleagues are resistant to artificial intelligence? Are they embracing it wholeheartedly? Like,
I mean, it's definitely complicated, like, it's, so, you know, we're talking about AI as if it's a singular tool, but there's all these subsets of things that take place in AI. So stuff like machine learning that you're talking about, where we're able to teach computers how to find particular data points and use them. So like, you know, one of the examples that, you know, so I asked ChatGPT, you know, explain like I'm 80, what is machine learning? It's like, you remember when you're teaching your kids how to pick out flowers, like out of a picture? I mean, that's functionally what it is, but we have such huge data sets now as corporations and things like that, that nobody's ever gonna be able to read through in any meaningful fashion. But because computers can look at data so quickly, it's so helpful in stuff like marketing or, you know, problem finding, security, stuff like that, to where, you know, somebody's trying to intrude on your network. Well, AI can recognize those things so much faster than humans can. And so to not employ it would be foolish from these perspectives. But then in, you know, other places where the morality of it gets much more gray or even black, yeah, there's definitely mixed feelings about it for sure.
okay, that's helpful, helpful kind of segue into kind of the next thought here in terms of morality. We're here and approaching this from a biblical worldview. We've come here, we have that in common tonight. And we really want to think through this from a biblical worldview perspective and from a biblical perspective. So I'd love to know, and maybe Dr. Dye, maybe we start with you, and especially I'd also like to hear from Jennifer and Amy on this question as well. How do you think that a biblical worldview kind of influences your understanding of artificial intelligence? And then ladies as well, kind of thinking through that in terms of how that kind of works through education as well, and how you approach that with your students.
I'll try not to go too hard into professor mode. I know I only have 2 minutes.
That's
so
okay.
I'm gonna set myself to 1.75 speed.
I love it. Let's do it.
The way I usually approach technology is to ask, well, this is a question you asked, but I'm gonna ask anyway, that's okay. If you think about technology as being good, bad, or neutral, and usually what I find is when I ask the audience that, there's a few that say good, a few that say bad, and everybody kind of goes neutral. And so my goal is to say, what I want to tell you is I think technology is good theologically, but never neutral. What do you mean by that? So what I'm trying to say is that when we open up the Bible, the first page, we see God creates. And a couple of verses later, we see that we're made in the image of God. So part of that image bearing is for us to make and create things, to fill the earth with things that we made. You know, when you dump out Legos and you watch your kid make something, I think that's what God is doing when he makes them. He just delights in us making things. So I think that's there from the very, very beginning. At the same time, though, whenever we use tools, they're always formative to us in some way. So they're never, ever going to be neutral. Now, we can certainly use them for good, and we can use them for bad. We can talk about that. But whether we're using them for good or bad, they're always going to shape us in some particular way. So if you use a shovel, and you're doing something great, like building a church, or you're doing something bad, like axe murdering, either way, at the end of that, you're going to get blisters and calluses on your hand. You're going to be shaped by that. So one of our questions is, how do we form ourselves in a direction that most honors God? How do we use technology in a way that we are developing our mind, our body, our soul, our strength in a way that loves God and loves our neighbor? That's where I would start when it comes to sort of a theology of, and then move on from there.
Super. Thank you.
Okay, that was really hard to follow.
That's all right.
From my perspective, as a high school teacher and as a mom raising up little boys, one of the things I see is that some of my students have taken to the AI feature on their Snapchat as their new best friend. So when you look over and you're like, who are you snapping now? They're like, oh, it's my boyfriend, or oh, it's my best friend. And I'm like, that's an AI. They're like, yeah, they told me what I want to hear. I love it. And that just terrifies me. They're not building relationships with people, with meaningful, other humans that they can grow and develop stronger, better relationships with. They're, fascinated with this technology that will, give them instant gratification, but it doesn't last. They're constantly looking for more and more. And so, to me, that goes against what we were taught in the Bible, to build relationships, to be in community with each other. And I think that even more so than, students not knowing how to write a paper on their own, is what scares me the most about it.
Sure.
So, I don't have an easy answer.
That's great.
It's pretty fancy.
Anything to add, Jennifer?
Well, yeah, I think that I see this from a parent perspective and as a teacher perspective,
Right.
but it's the responsibility and ethics side of it that scares me a little bit.
Okay.
because the lines get blurred. And I see, like, at least when it first came out, kids were using it more as a search engine. And it is not a search engine. It is not like typing something into Google. And I don't think they really quite understood that some of the information they were getting is biased, it's false. I mean, it's not always right. And they were just taking it as this is exactly what it said it was. So, you know, it scares me a little bit that they don't think through that anything we get, even in Google, is not always right. And as a parent, I mean, naturally I want my kid to be able to learn to write papers and do all those things, but just the ethics side of it, I mean, is that where we should be going for answers to things? Because that's not what we teach our kids, especially when it comes to scripture and biblical things. You need to open your Bible and look for the answers. Don't ask ChatGPT. It's not going to give you the answer I want it to give you.
Okay, that's good. How do you think that relates, let me jump back into something Amy began to address there in terms of interaction with human beings and what relationships look like. Does this kind of call into question like maybe our theology of human dignity and like what needs to be a person? I'm just curious if you any of y'all thought through a little bit about that in terms of relationships and kind of the importance of like what humanity is and how do we approach that? I know it's a little bit vague, but you can jump in if anybody has any questions or any thoughts there. It's too vague, then I'll move on. But I'm wondering if ChatGPT is, or not just ChatGPT, but artificial intelligence in general is in any way maybe taking our thoughts of the value of humanity down, dignity of humanity down at all. Is it bringing it down a notch or not?
I mean, I'm sure that's probably going to be just on an individualistic basis. Like, I mean, I think if you interact with any of these tools at this point long enough, you're going to begin to see the same thing that we saw with Siri, that it's going to give repetitive answers. What it's doing is still very limited, even though it's a whole lot better than what Siri was able to do. But, you know, I think we already do this in some ways. Like, I mean, if you just think about it, so many people create imaginary versions of other people in their head. So it's not a huge stretch to think that this is easily where we can fit into that category for people who already just can't handle human interaction or don't want to do the work of relationship with one another. That I think it's just another step in that direction of where people naturally go. We don't always live in reality properly, so this is going to fit in that paradigm very easily for some.
Okay, that's good. So don't want to spend all our time just like bashing all the things we've seen. I want to know some benefits. Give me like each panelist maybe just your like favorite benefit of artificial intelligence.
Healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay. Can you hold on before you pass that? Can you be a little more specific?
Sure. So just in doing research and even before I started doing research, the healthcare really seemed to be the best benefit. But as I've dived into it more and more, like if you think about it, if you've been to a hospital or a doctor's office recently, they always have the jankiest computers. Like tech has had a really hard time of getting into the healthcare industry. But AI can solve so many of those problems where they're missing things on charts. Like just in the idea of imaging. So as far as AI and doing imaging, it has a 0% failure in some tests. 0% for humans, 7% like for tumors and things like that. And it's like just getting those kinds of technologies involved. Like my wife had a tumor that was missed at some point, so like that stuck with me. But there are so many things where this, I think, will free up could potentially free up doctors and nurses to do what they were trained to do, rather than getting lost in all this paperwork. That AI can sift through and help them make better decisions, better diagnoses, and not miss the things that they so easily miss because they're tired and overworked.
That's good. Thanks.
So I would say efficiency, because I'm not great at writing emails and writing reference letters and things like that. So and I do use AI to do that, and yes, I need to read through it, but it saves me a ton of time in things that are not really super important to what I need to spend my time on all day. And if it can help me be more efficient, then I'm all for it.
Yes, the efficiency piece is fantastic. But like one of the things that I think Bailey had mentioned is all of the data that we have today. Specifically thinking back to like research. 40 different universities doing similar research, getting similar data, but they don't know it because they're not all in the same communication realm. So using AI to pull all this information together and doing it much quicker than a person sitting at a desk reading over 40 different research files, but then the AI being able to compile that data and just being able to have quicker access to more accurate information.
Okay.
The thing that comes to my mind is translation. So at Dallas Seminary, we have a bunch of different languages. The students in Spanish and Chinese and other languages, and so being able to kind of supercharge that is really fun. And then all the Bible translation that's going on, I'm trying to get to those lost languages. There's a lot of augmentation there. So I'm not obviously trying to use it to do everything for you, but that first wave of things, or when you translate the first verse, every word you do, then all of a sudden they start filling in the other words. And it's just a really, really cool part of it. And even then doing it live now, so we used to do it all transcribed, but I can have a conversation with someone in another language pretty well and be able to read the captions, and it's a blast.
That's good.
So as a teenager, AI doesn't have very many practical applications for me. So my favorite thing is actually the one thing that I think is practical as a teenager in school, and that is AI, while not good for researching or use in writing, a chatbot can generate practice problems for school.
Yeah.
So I tried that in like math problems and whatnot. So if I want to study, I feel that I can trust it to at least generate problems for me to try to solve, to try to get a better understanding of what I'm dealing with.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Ethan. That kind of leads me to exactly where I want to go next, was just kind of get more specific to education in how, first of all, students and teens in the educational system could more effective, or you think would be benefited by artificial intelligence in that way? Maybe the biggest benefit educationally do you see? You already given yours.
Just the practice problems.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I like that.
Okay, for me, like a theology class, I might have a lecture I want to go through, but I might just, in front of the class, ask something and have it show up, like, what is God's wrath mean? Like, what does that actually mean? Is he angry with you? How should we understand that? And just see what it comes up with. And I can kind of see that it's merging together 3 or 4 different theologians over the ages or whatever. So we talk about it together, and then I'll go through some material and we'll come back to it. And so it's able to kind of see what does the summary look like, and what does it look like to actually go a little bit deeper into that. So we just kind of move back and forth that way.
So this summer, I went to a conference and heard from Eamon Rock, who is a principal in Compton, California. And he has no idea how to code, has never coded in his life, but he was trying to figure out how to get his kids to school. And so he developed a program called K-12C Learn to Earn. And he did it all through ChatGPT. He developed the code, wrote the whole program, launched it all, and it's where kids can earn Bitcoin as they go through school, and then once they graduate, they can cash that in to go to college. And he did all of that through AI. So until I heard him speak on what a positive change this has made in his school, I was not really on board for getting involved with all of the AI stuff in the classroom, but he completely changed my mind from that one instance. So I think it's really cool.
Well, our Cochran teachers, they're using it in their classroom. I've seen them do things like asking the ChatGPT bot, to give them, I don't know, a perspective from somebody in history and see what that bot says, and then lets the kids kind of think through, like, is that really what happened in history? Are those the facts? We have one teacher that left it running on her TV screen as an extra person in the room, and so they would just ask it whatever questions the kids were doing, and then they thought it was hilarious because they're like, it didn't even know what it was talking about, when it probably knew more than they did at the time, but they didn't know. They just know what she had taught them. So I mean, I think teachers are getting creative with ways to use it positively in the classroom and to more enhance their lessons and not use it as like a crutch for teaching.
And this is still early, but one of the things that I'm excited about is that they're talking about and working on creating teacher assistants that basically are able to help identify holes in children's education where they're struggling. And rather than the teacher trying to help keep all these kids up, that AI is able to generate extra practice work based on where those kids are currently struggling. And which it still can't help with empathy or critical thinking, but that is one of those holes where as teachers get more and more overwhelmed, giving them any help that we possibly could sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. What do you think then, Jennifer, you mentioned possibly using AI as a crutch. Like in what ways do you think maybe we're becoming too reliant on AI in the educational field especially, and maybe thinking that it's having a certain effect that maybe it's really not? Are there any?
Well, I don't think it's okay to use AI to be lazy. Like, sure, I can type in, I need a biology lesson over cells in Curipod, and it's gonna give me what I need for the entire week. But I still have the responsibility of looking through it. Is that covering the material that my students need to know? Is it ethical? Does it have facts that match up to real science? And I think we run that, gray line of how much do you just click the button because I'm running late and I didn't have time to come up with something for my kids to do today, and then you just throw it out there and then it's not right. I think it's also a little scary for those baby teachers that are straight out of college, that they don't know, they don't have curriculum, they don't have something to fall back on, and they're just gonna trust the ChatGPT. ChatGPT will, even for us public educators, you can type in your state of Texas TEAC and it will produce an entire lesson plan based off of that TEAC. That scares me a little bit because that completely takes the teacher's thinking and planning out of the whole process.
So do y'all see an accuracy issue related to a lot of this information that's coming your way?
So at FBA, we have everything that is, we use secular textbooks that we biblically integrate. And so one of the things that I had punched in was title of the textbook and biblically integrated. And so it's talking about the 8 characteristics of living organisms and how Genesis 1 supports what Charles Darwin taught us about evolutionary theory. And I was like, oh, that's fun. So definitely gotta fact check the ChatGPT sometimes.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know. Good job. Good. Dr. Dyer, let me ask you this. Do you think that it is inevitable that artificial intelligence is just part of our society for good? Meaning forever, for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it already is, right? So all of us are using this all
It's
the
not
time.
going away.
No, not going away, no.
Okay. How should we then, if that's the case, be teaching people about it more? Are there specifics that we can help people gain a better understanding so they can understand, hey, this isn't going anywhere. Here's how you ought to start, at least have a starting place for me thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of buckets we could think about. I mean, there's one that are just a very obvious evil things that we can do, taking advantage of people, using surveillance or something like that in a way that someone doesn't want. So there's all of those things, producing images that we ought not look at, all that sort of stuff. I think then there's the kind of middle category more of trust-based things, where none of us can trust anything anymore, right? On the news or channels, all that sort of stuff. But now we can't trust each other because we're presenting ourselves as if we know something that we don't, because we use something to generate that. So I think our relational trust is the other big one. And then for us, just personally, I think it really is, we're always tempted to get results without the process of becoming. We're just constantly tempted with that. I run a little bit, every once in a while I've done a half marathon. I would love to be able to run a full marathon, but I'm not willing to put in the work, right? And what education is about, it's not about regurgitating facts. It's about your own intellectual formation and becoming the kind of person who can have conversations about particular topics, the kind of person that can imagine a cool prompt to type into AI. But if you don't know anything, you can't even make a good prompt for AI, right? So we as educators, we have to love our students enough to form them and not just inform them. And so I think, but we as students, we have to be willing to say, I'm going to do something hard to become something. Because just getting something for free, that's fine for today, but it doesn't make you anything for tomorrow. So I think again, this like really morally evil thing, and there's these relational things, and there's just who am I? The responsibility of being that God has made me. How do I maximize that?
Really?
And I think the other side is just, just to remember that news and all that is going to point us towards fear in general. And so I think helping people understand the categories better just in general of what AI is. So another medical thing that, came up is for like, arms and legs, what I can't remember what they're called. Whatever, the new ones. What? prosthetic limbs, like, those are being utilized with AI more and more, so to have like haptic feedback, where like if you're walking up a hill, you feel it pushing back on your leg more, but that's just AI. So, we don't need to be afraid of AI in general. We should definitely try to be a part of the conversation as much as we can of the uses of AI, but it's not something we need to be afraid of. Tools used to God's glory can always find a way to do that. Like we can use AI to the glory of God. We will increasingly do that as a society. But I think one of the main conversations is just try to help people not be just generally afraid of these things as well.
That's good. Thank you. Ethan, let me ask you this. Do you get the feeling that the older crowd is doing a healthy job of discipling younger ones like you in artificial intelligence, in technology in general, and an understanding of it? Or is it kind of being left to you to figure out yourself?
I mean, these people are doing a great job here.
All right.
I think a lot of what causes the younger generation to kind of discount a little bit of what the older generations are saying is how much of it is actually fear-based and how much of it is actually accurate. So when you bring a panel of a bunch of technology experts and me, you learn a little bit and you can trust it, right? Because this is what these people do. But yeah, some other people, it's not, doesn't seem trustworthy.
Sure, a little suspect. Okay, good. That's good. Thanks, Ethan. Then let me bounce off that to kind of Amy and Jennifer over here. Then, in what ways are y'all beginning to think through how you might kind of disciple and educate your students on artificial intelligence and how to use it properly?
I think honestly, a lot of it starts with what they learn at home. If they're learning, good work ethics, and they're being taught that if it comes easy come, easy go, and we're working for the glory of God, not for man, I think it's much easier to help the students see, where they need to put in the effort. It's easy to teach them to use ChatGPT. We can grade them on the prompts that they choose to use and how they take that information and turn it into a finished product on their own. But that isn't teaching them the critical thinking skills that they're going to need when they get out into the real world. A lot of the things that I read from the ChatGPT on some of my lessons is very inaccurate from what we are taught in church and what we read in the Bible. I think one of them even generated a fictitious Bible verse. Like I might never looked that one up, it's not there. So it's a good tool to teach them that not everything you hear and see is accurate. You have to filter it through the lens of God's word.
Great. Thanks.
Well, and I think a lot of this has to come from teaching parents, because they don't know AI any more than the kids do. So the kids probably know it better than most adults, because they are growing up in a completely different society than we did. But I think in a school setting, as the technology person, we're pulling kids in, we're having conversations. If we catch them using ChatGPT, we try to have that conversation of, this is the problem with it. Some of our teachers have kind of taken the approach of everything you do needs to be 80% human and no more than 20% bot. Like it's okay to use it as a resource. It's not okay to use it as a whole, turning everything in and you did nothing but type it in. But I think a lot of it on the other side you have to teach the adults too. We're all learning this together.
For sure, I definitely am. Dr. Dyer, do you think or maybe the question isn't do you think, but maybe what role does the church have to play in this discussion, and should we be bringing to the table? Should there be a very kind of outspoken stance that the church kind of takes and speaks about loudly, or is this more of a kind of around the table kind of conversation that we just kind of slowly discuss with people? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think with all technology, there's ways to work that into anything that you're talking about. We talk about the process of sanctification. God is making us into something, we will talk about this idea of formation as would be one of those areas. We talk about trust or relationships, we talk about a world that's literally fractured. And if you're the kind of person that can sit in front of somebody and listen to them for 30 minutes without checking your phone, that's a life-giving skill that you could do with somebody. That is so countercultural, just to be able to concentrate, right? So if you want to develop the kind of mind that concentrates, that would be probably the most loving act that you could do to any of your neighbors. So I think there's all these little places where you can work it in. And then I do think, you asked at the beginning, what's one of the reasons why this all caught our attention? I think, for the last couple hundred years, we've been dealing with mechanical technology and how that takes away jobs. Well, this kind of technology seems like it's going to take away a different class of jobs. And I think that got a lot of people's attention. Like, this would come from me, not just the guy down the street. And so I do think we want to have that attitude toward looking at, who might be affected by this and how might we come around them in a helpful way and sort of be the church to people that might suffer through this kind of change.
Great, thank you. Let me throw this to all of you as believers here. Very clearly, the scriptures tell us to do all to the glory of God. How might you have that in mind when you're using artificial intelligence or technology in general? How can we use this? How might someone practically use AI to the glory of God?
So for this, I'm not going to speak from personal experience. I'm going to speak from the experience of a friend of mine who works at the same ministry that I do. The ministry allowed him and his department to use a software thingamajigger that used AI as a means of photoshopping, right? And photoshopping seems a very neutral, not morally extreme thing that you can use. But the thing is, with our ministry, we get pictures and we get things that some of it can't go to the public. Okay? So he showed me some of the things that it does, and this Photoshop does a really good job of keeping the picture's quality while also removing the things that we cannot share with the public. So it's a very physical example, but what I mean by this is we can use the very simple uses of AI and just the mere use of them with God in mind, like in the use of a ministry. Sure. Use it to the glory of God.
That's good. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, I think part of using it to the glory of God is taking a step back and thanking God for how it's already helping so many things in our lives. Like it's not just in our navigation in our cars; it's part of the computer systems. Like there are ways that car companies are researching and using data sets in order to build better cars, to build more efficient safety features and things like that. Like this is going to increasingly, hopefully, save lives in various different areas. And so, even though it may not be our hands that are touching it, part of how we can give glory to God is by taking that step back and thanking Him for how we've already benefited from it. Again, spell checker is technically an AI according to 1954 logic, so you're welcome for that. Beyond that, I mean, just the idea of being able to do research. So, like, you guys are talking about creating practice lessons. So one of the things that I did with ChatGPT is see if it could give me a practical lesson on learning guitar, and it did. And so, like, not just a lesson, but a lesson plan. And then you can ask, as it gives you a lesson plan, you go and ask, and it'll tell you about finger pickings and how long to practice this and what it needs to feel like to get there. Like, so it's even if you get the lesson, we can use these things to chase those skills that maybe seem out of reach to us. Like most people want to learn how to play an instrument. Well, if you have this, you can get it, started on your own, and then go to a teacher when you get beyond what ChatGPT can help you with. Like, there's lots of things.
So essentially, kind of the human flourishing kind of idea, like opportunities to maybe, as Dr. Dyer said, be formed and become things that were growth and sanctification. There are opportunities even there. Okay, that's good. Y'all mentioned ChatGPT a lot, and I have tonight, but we haven't talked specifically about it. I want to know, and I think someone alluded to this already, the difference between ChatGPT and the search engine. Why are they different? What does that look like from an educational perspective as well?
So ChatGPT is more of a conversation. You are having a conversation with a bot. And you will have to, it's like an ongoing conversation, because you can make your question very broad, then the bot will answer, and then you can respond back to it, oh, but what about this, or could you add this in? So it's more conversational, where a search engine, you're just typing in your prompt, which, prompt engineering is a huge part of both things. If you don't search the right thing, you're gonna get the wrong information. ChatGPT is exactly the same way. Prompt engineering is like a whole different science in and of itself, dealing with AI and knowing how to word things. But I think, from my perspective, I think it has to do with that conversational piece. It is so much easier to just have a conversation with a bot than it is to type things into Google.
Okay, so do y'all think then that the kind of search engine skill of learning essentially how to research via a search engine is more important than being able to converse with a bot, or is that an unfair way to even compare them? Being in terms of like a student, when you're teaching a student to research something, or what it might look like.
Well, I think it's two different skills.
Okay.
Because you're communicating with two different things differently. So you have to know the right words to say. I mean, we teach kids all the time, if you put your quotation marks around the Google search, then it searches for the specific word. Because if you put a whole sentence in there, Google doesn't know what it's searching for. ChatGPT is a little bit different, because it can understand an entire sentence like you were talking to a human.
Anyone else?
Sure.
No?
Yeah. So I think Google's probably more important at this point, because it is better developed, like ChatGPT. Like, one of the things that will tell you the press article is its data stops at 2021 at a certain point. And there are certain questions that it just, won't answer as well, fair enough. But, we need to be teaching about, not just taking one source, like you're saying, but learning to find multiple sources, because this is how we gain knowledge. It's not from just looking at things from one perspective, but gaining multiple perspectives on things too, which ChatGPT can give you that if you can learn to ask it the right questions. But at this point, I think Google is the far better developed skill.
So students using those programs may be missing out on multiple perspectives, is that what you're
Sure, well, and because the data set is purposefully limited.
Sure, that makes sense. Are there any other things that y'all would think that students are missing out on educationally by using programs like these?
I think they already pointed out just
Sure.
that, Google's usually gonna take you directly to some type of source, however good that source is for bronze. But then the chat interface is really trying to merge all of that into something that sounds like what all those together would say. And so it's not really gonna help you find something directly. And then there is that problem where it can do what they usually call hallucinations, where it's giving you the best answer, but it may not actually be a true answer. So I was thinking about what's in, everybody look at me, I'm looking at the back of the wall, and it says, "Great is the Lord and most worthy of." See, he looked back there. See that guy? I told him not to. But if you were to say, what's the next word? Great is the Lord worthy of praise. But it could be honor, it could be glory. Those could be right answers too. But they might not actually be in the Bible in that exact way. So it's right-ish, but not actually. And that's the kind of thing that's going to produce a lot for you. And you have to be careful of that, because we've all already seen all the news stories of, a lawyer producing a brief that cites cases that don't exist and all that sort of stuff. And you talked about a couple of those. So I think it's that difference between like the raw data and then someone summarizing it for you with some degree of accuracy.
Good. Something that I think people my age will be missing out if they choose one or the other is the feeling of doing the work. When I'm using a search engine and I'm trying to do research and I have a presentation, I feel much more alive. I feel much more like I know what I'm talking about when I've actually researched what I'm going to be talking about, because I feel like I've learned and I've done the work. Now, if I were to use, say, ChatGPT, I would possibly feel more like I'm just repeating the words that the bot told me to say, and I wouldn't be nearly as confident or even nearly as informed.
Great.
That's good, and I think that kind of goes back to what Jennifer said earlier tonight, kind of about the idea of a crutch, which I think is a helpful image for us. And I think we can definitely agree that that's a pretty big issue. There's lots of things that a student who's relying solely on that or using this crutch is missing out on educationally. But let's talk about students who are resisting artificial intelligence saying, I don't want to do it, are they potentially missing out on anything? Does it put them behind? Is there anything they might be missing out on by resisting the use of artificial intelligence, things like ChatGPT and their research was kind of.
I think it's fair to be resisting it, and you might miss out on a little bit. I don't know that that the use of things like ChatGPT or AI in schools has gotten so far that it would put them at a distinct disadvantage. I think if they're resisting, then they're going to find different ways to make up for that disadvantage if there is one. And maybe that's just my faith in my generation to be able to do that speaking. But I think that if they're saying go to ChatGPT, I'm going to do this, I'm going to figure out that, then it's good. It's instilling them a sense of independence. Something that, at least right now, is going to put them at a disadvantage.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think you always want to have that in the world, but not of the world, right? You want to be somewhat aware of what's going on. At the same time, in the broader tech trend, probably 10, 15 years ago, we would talk about the digital divide and schools that had devices versus schools that don't. And that's kind of flipped on its head now, where Silicon Valley schools are very anti-screen and that kind of thing. So you have to be very rich to afford to not have screen education. So it's kind of the opposite now. Because we kind of know that that sort of education doesn't always form the mind particularly well. And the very people that made iPads grew up without them, and the people that made AI grew up without it, So I think you want to be aware of it and be using it, but I think you also want to be just aware that the very highest level of people are the ones that are most resistant to these often, because they know it the best. And so there's a back and forth, I would say, more caution, but not a full-on rejection, because that's a way to be involved.
Okay. Great. Any others from an educational perspective there? Students who aren't using AI to cause them behind or anything like that? Any concerns you have if they weren't using it?
Well, one of the things that we were told at our conference, which is what made me actually start looking into using the AI, was that for instance, a teacher, because we're at a teacher's conference, a teacher won't be replaced by AI, but a teacher who is more effective, more efficient, and can have a better work-life balance using AI will last longer than a teacher who's burning herself out, trying to do everything without the use of tools that make your work-life balance better. So, from a teacher perspective, I do think that you can miss out on some of the benefits of it if you're just completely unwilling to at least learn about it.
Sure.
Which I think that goes for students too.
Yeah.
Because, as we're getting kids ready to go into college and career situations, we're preparing them for things that aren't even there right now. We don't know, AI is still very young in this aspect, the language models. So what is that gonna look like in 5 years? We have to help teach these kids now that it's okay to not be afraid of it, but use it responsibly. So if they're completely rejecting it, my concern would be, what does that look like 5 years down the road if they haven't even been exposed to it or are not willing to see some of the benefits of it?
One of the running jokes in IT in general is that, most of my job is done by Google anyway. I'm constantly having to research, the day-to-day stuff, I know how to do what I do, but when I run into those walls, my job is so much more efficiently done if somebody else has already had that problem. And I can just put that in the Google search and be like, oh, this person did, how did they solve it? Oh yeah, that makes sense. Or they submitted a bug, it'll get solved here in a little bit. But I think that we're getting that direction with these kinds of technologies. Again, I think they're still in an infancy kind of phase, but they are useful. And so as long as they don't replace, so the idea is, the categories that I have is this, is as long as students keep it as information and not knowledge. So knowledge to me is having experience and understanding. It's not just, I turn on the light switch, the light comes on, it's magic. It's, understanding how it works. But it's probably run this way, like an electrician. That's knowledge of how electricity functions, where I have the information that this does this. Those are vastly different things. So as long as they treat that technology as this is a source of information, but it does not give me knowledge. But that's true of Google as well. We have so many faux experts in the world because they read one Facebook post, I guess. So I think this is just going to be the younger generation's version of that.
Do you think that, that's good. Do you think that AI takes away potentially takes away the ability of a student or possibly even educators to be able to articulate their knowledge of a certain subject? Does it remove that articulation, or does it actually enhance it, do you think?
I think it's gonna depend on how it's utilized. I mean, just to run it, like, one of the ways that I tell people in general, if you want to truly know that you know something, try to teach it. Like, I think that is one of the primary steps to get to that point of expertise, is being able to teach other people effectively how to do it. So, I think it can be helpful on that, but, it also could replace it for some people as well, where they lose that skill of being able to pass it on well, so.
And my follow-up question to that for all of you is, does that matter? Like, if AI is available to a person, does it matter that whether or not they can articulate their knowledge of a certain subject, if they've got AI at their disposal?
Yeah, I think it matters. I
Okay.
think you've got to be able to think. And I think that, especially with students, they can use AI to articulate, they're going to. That's the reality of what we're up against. But are we teaching them to use critical thinking skills? Are we teaching them to problem solve and to take what they're getting out of an AI and use their own brain? I think that's where it gets, where you have to just make sure they understand the difference between their own thinking and what a computer is giving them.
All right, let's get a little more specific then. Should students be able to claim AI work as their own research? And give me a why or why not on that one.
I'll start on this one. I spent the whole summer working on a project for this, but unfortunately MLA will let them cite it as a source. It's considered a conversation in MLA format. So, there has to be some limitations from the school on how many conversations can you have with ChatGPT as far as research. Then you get into the whole copyright and, it's not human made, it's a bot, that doesn't really get covered and all of that, and then plagiarism. So I think it's a messy situation because, it's pulling from sources that maybe didn't even give permission for their knowledge to be shared with somebody and to be regurgitated into an essay that ChatGPT wrote. So in my opinion, I think that's one of the biggest things we need to teach students is the ethical side of it. You are taking somebody else's work. Maybe ChatGPT jumbled it all up and put it in a new sentence using 5 different people's information, but it's somebody's information. It got it from somewhere.
Go ahead, Ethan, sure.
So yeah, I started thinking about this a little bit. Like I didn't fully know where to begin with that, the question, because it's not necessarily a source specifically, but it's not your work, and I think that it was basically just perfectly stated right there. The way that I'm approaching it right now is I'm not using it as a source. I'm going to find other ways, other places, so that when it's maybe a bit more finalized and maybe there's a more standardized way of going about people using AI or chatbots, then I can use it, and I'm not causing any disturbance. I'm not making any issues, and my work is protected.
Okay. Good. Dr. Dyer, let me ask you this. What would you say essentially to a student who said, hey, I put this information into the chatbot, it's my research. Like, are there any ethical questions or kind of questions of profitability that you would say to them? Like, how would you address them on that issue?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it goes back to what our purpose in education actually is. And I work at a graduate school where people are paying to do this, so that's a different context where you're saying, well, you're not really getting what you're paid for because you're paying to be transformed in some way, to be able to do a thing on the other end. It's not just getting a piece of paper, but it's actually being able to do something. It's a lot harder for a student who's kind of forced to go to school to feel like that they're actually having something happen to them. And cheating is already rampant, and grade pressure is already there, and so you're saying, well, I'm gonna get in the top 10% so I can get into the college of my choice. There's a lot of pressure on kids, so I think I have a real compassionate approach on that part. But then again, to still remind you of saying, you know, if the goal of this assignment is to do your own research, then you're not doing that, right? On the other hand, if we only assign regurgitative assignments, then we're sort of saying all education is just spitting out facts, and then a machine is a lot better at doing that than I am. So that the burden comes back to us as educators to go, like, how can I design something that really kind of forces you through something that forces you to become something? That's really hard to do at scale. We've got a lot of time pressures, and we have great assignments, you know, multiple choice is faster than essays and all that kind of stuff. So we all have a lot of pressures on both sides, and I think asking that question, so why do you feel like you need to do this? What's going on?
That's really helpful, thank you. Okay, well, man, you guys have helped me fly through a lot of this stuff, and we've kind of reached the end of our time limit for the main questions. We want to give a little bit of time to some Q&A. Got some submitted. If you have any questions, you want to submit it through the Scan Me over there. Randy will get those, and they'll come during this time. But I want to address some of what we heard from here. Got this question. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on it. There will be countless jobs and entire industries that will be vastly disrupted or eliminated by true AI computing. How should we, as parents and teachers, best prepare our children for a lifetime of learning so they aren't feeling completely defeated by a career path that may or may not be relevant in a few years? Question there. If I need to repeat it, let me know. I know it's kind of long.
I definitely think we should think of AI as one of those transformative technologies. Like, again, the roads used to be for horses, like, and now that sounds ridiculous to us. You know, it wasn't that long, the parents' generation would have thought of sitting at a desk job their whole lives. Sounded ridiculous. And so we do have to train people that work may not look the same in the future because of the use of AI. It is going to shift fundamentally many things in society and work, and so we do have to prepare people for that, and even prepare people that are currently in jobs. That technology has always created more jobs than it's taken away, but there is upheaval and pain in it. So even we as a church need to prepare for, as we walk into that, like it might be something that's untenable for a while, but typically speaking, technology has always created more jobs than it's destroyed. So that's also a very good perspective.
Anything else? Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, AI is created by humans, it didn't create itself. So humans are still going to need to be involved in AI creation, and as any kind of this AI technology, because it's going to evolve into something a lot more than it is right now. You know, 5 years from now, it'll be a totally different conversation based off of what it's created, because it's in such a young stage. So I know at the high school, we're teaching kids how to have skills that translate into future jobs. You know, those thinking skills, you know, being able to use technology and being able to learn how to use technology appropriately and to go with the times. Like,
Anything else? That's a great question. Okay, good. All right, got a few more questions from our audience here. What can teachers do to protect those students who are writing their own papers and doing their own work versus students who are turning in AI-generated papers and work?
well, I can start with this, because there are lots of AI checker tools out there. They're not great. I mean, in fact, the AI caught the Constitution and said it was written by an AI. So they're not great. Yeah, I mean, not good. So I think those tools can help us, you know, because ultimately kids are going to find a way around. They're going to do it. They're going to get away with whatever they can get away with. But I think this comes back to, like he was saying, are our assignments just kids regurgitating information? Are they having to think? Teachers have to be aware of what they're reading. I mean, we know our kids. You know your kids. When you read their papers, you're like, that is not a paper they wrote. We know them. So I think a little bit of that falls back on the teacher to catch it and to teach those kids and correct that behavior early on.
Yes, so I think the biggest way to help the students who are doing their own work is to know your students, to build those relationships, to know what they are capable of producing, and to be able to readily identify when I have never heard that speech pattern out of you, I know that this didn't come from you. And then also to find new and different ways to implement the critical thinking skills and assignments. If we're doing laboratory work, and have some more deep dive questions where they have to answer it in the lab using a textbook, heaven forbid, instead of being on a Chromebook all the time. I think, getting away from the screens and going back, to textbooks, to libraries, to having your hands do the research instead of just your fingers type in the words, really helps those students who are willing to put in the effort and do the work themselves.
And then, the tools like Turnitin or whatever, they're supposed to detect the AI part, but they're also, the more assignments that you turn in, they're learning how you speak, just like you were talking about, that you know that student, and it gets to know that student, and it's like, wait a second, that doesn't sound like that student anymore. So if you can find ways to ensure, like, you have a, live thing, you have to actually have to type out so you can watch somebody do it, that becomes the first input, and then the next one, it sounds like that or doesn't sound like that. So it's, let the robots fight back, right?
Yeah.
It's good.
Awesome. All right. Great. Here's another question from our audience. Is there a line as a society that we should draw that says we should only take AI this far? Okay. Is there a line we need to draw and say, hey, we shouldn't go any further with this artificial intelligence thing? It's taking on too much.
There's been some efforts toward this, right? So in another field, there was a global effort to say, we're not going to do human cloning. And for the most part, people have stuck to that for the last 20 or so years. And when one guy did that over in China, he got in trouble there too. So there are some places for that. I do think, though, that this is one of those ones where if some people agree not to, somebody else is going to do that. So I think it's going to keep going. There's a certain inevitability to that. So staying in that and trying to own the ethical conversation and moving forward with it is probably, in this case, I think, the better strategy. The predictive things are that, we move from sort of narrow intelligence, really good at specific skills, recognizing photos, generating stuff, that we get to general intelligence and more like a human, and as general intelligence makes super intelligence. That's all the big, worry in the future. But I don't see this slowing down, and I don't know that there's a way to fully stop regulatory-wise. I know none of us probably want giant regulations, and yet at the same time, we do probably need some level of that at the same time. But you've seen how congressional panels go, not everybody really knows what's going on, and so it is really, really hard to do that level. And so I think, staying involved and having, either you go work for that company in the future, you be that voice at that company, not just standing back, but being in that place is where we need to be. Great.
I think there are particular uses of AI that should definitely be, so stuff like deepfake technology, where you're taking literal people and putting them up in a fake format. Like, I mean, I don't think it's going away, but I wish there was some way to regulate this particular technology because it's already done awful things, and I don't think anything that I've heard about the potential goods of it outweigh the evil that has already been done with this, creating and putting people's faces, having politicians say things that they never said. I have not heard any good use case that outweighs the things that have already been done with it. So I think particular uses of AI, absolutely, it would be great if we could regulate. Unfortunately, because of how little our governments and even the worldwide governments have refused to keep up with technology, that ship has already sailed in a lot of ways, unless we get something like AI involved, because we haven't regulated technology well as a world.
Right. Let me ask you this question. Some people interact with AI as if it were a living organism. Have you encountered this? And is there any sense in which AI can be construed as such?
Sure. I'm kind of a nonsense person. I don't know if you picked up on that, but I'll talk to the eventual super AI that's going to take over every once in a while, just in case. It's just a fun thought. But I mean, I see there's a lot of danger to it, and God has created humans for human relationships as the primary goal outside of Him. We thrive in human relationship that the computer's just never going to be able to do because God stands in the midst of it. It is irreplaceable to us. The world is not going to see it, so I think it could be very detrimental to a lot of things in life. We don't see this as much on our side of the world, but other parts of the world struggle a lot with shut-ins, and people who are already locking themselves inside their rooms and never coming out, and like entire subgroups of people. And so, yeah, I think there is a danger for people who are already falling into these categories and don't have that kind of mindset of godly relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I see it with kids. They're using it all the time to communicate with bots. I mean, they're using ChatGPT. I mean, my own kids will have a full conversation with Alexa. She's not real. But I mean, yeah, and I mean, they just, I don't know, they just want to talk to somebody or they want an answer to their question. So, I mean, I think it is a serious danger for kids to fall into that. And our kids today are already more isolated than they've ever been. Like, they don't talk to people, they text, and that is it. And sometimes they don't even text anymore because they're so social media driven. They just browse social media, look at how many likes they've got. So I think that is a big concern with it.
Yeah, the social media thing. I hear students talk more about who they follow on social media than their actual friends. They're people that they are in community with, people that they see on a daily basis. And so I think it can be a very slippery slope where we lose how to build a relationship with people if we're completely dependent upon technology to provide us our relationship needs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fully with all the folks here on those concerns. And then, there are always these positive sides of things where, someone types in, how do I kill myself? And is able to have a conversation with something that is actually maybe able to talk them out of that. So there are these positive things there. There's, kids who maybe are on the autism spectrum, people kind of lose their patience with them, but Syria never loses her patience with them. They're able to, have some of those conversations. Now, again, this goes to us developing that skill of being able to listen. And the reason why we like chatbots is because they listen and they stay with us. And most of us are too distracted to ever listen. So I think that kind of comes back to us to say, how can I, this is going to sound dumb, how can I be more like a chatbot? How can I be more open? How can I be more encouraging? How can I listen better? And how can I be able to converse with a real person?
All right, here's a question from the audience. Do corporations, for example, Meta, that are using, corporations that are utilizing AI, do they control the bias that are personified, or are those formed based on the data pool the AI has access to? In other words, do companies control data pools that AI has deployed?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. Okay.
So, like I would ask you this, if you close your eyes and you think of a picture of a nurse and a doctor standing next to another, it's a really good chance that the doctor is male and the nurse is female, right? Because we have all this bias built into our language already. So when we feed that to the robot, it gets that there, right? On the other hand, GPT, so the G is generative, the P is pre-processed, so it's reading stuff. The T is transformer, meaning that there's someone on the other end that you type in a prompt and it comes out and they give it a rating to say this is good or bad, and that is all kind of company driven, where it's saying this is a good answer, this is a bad answer, the kinds of things you're talking about which directions and answers are going. So there's part of it is what we're feeding it, our inherent bias is already there, and part of it is a second layer of direction. Now remember, all information is kind of biased, right? As soon as we name something, we're shaping what we see and we don't see about that thing. So bias itself is not necessarily bad. We want to be biased toward Christ, right? So that's going to be built into what we're coming from. So I think this is informative for us to say, how do I build a bias that I want to have in myself? What types of things do I want to put into my own mind? What do I want to be washing through my own brain so that when I stub my toe, what's going to come out? What's my bias when I stub my toe?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I answered a lot of those.
That's great. No, it's good. Add something, yeah, sure.
It's just on corporations, they're money driven, so even if they do have these pools, the vast majority of the time, unless they get in trouble for it, they're just gonna do still whatever it takes to get more money. So we need to know that they're not on the side of anything other than themselves. And so as we try to engage with them and teach other people about them, it's a reminder that these companies are not your friend. They are ultimately more about themselves than any good for society. Yeah.
All right, here's a question. What sort of boundaries should we set up in regards to AI usage in our lives as Christians? Boundaries. Maybe you have some personally.
So, I was thinking, as a Christian, naturally there are some stricter moral boundaries that you should not pass. And things like AI image generators, you should definitely watch yourself with that. But then I also thought on the level of using AI like in a community. All right, so I would consider school a community, right? And AI has its positive uses in that community. It also has uses in that community which are negative. And it's my job as a member of that community to uplift that community by staying as far away from those negative aspects as I can. Not just bumping up to the line, but like actually avoiding them completely. So when I said earlier that I'm not going to be using AI in research or for papers and whatnot, that's what I mean. I'm not even going to try to dive into the problem, I'm just going to circumvent it.
Yeah. Thanks. Good example. Anyone else in the boundaries? Okay. Yeah. I've got a couple more that I want to get to real quick, so let's do that for these. What are some real-life consequences that a student that utilizes AI could face moving into their future if they have AI available to them after they move into a career?
Well, I mean, we talk to kids all the time about if you use an AI to write your resume and do your emails and all the things, and then you land a job, you have to be able to follow through and do the job that they have hired you to do. So you don't want to falsely, advertise who you are or because they're not hiring a chatbot, they're hiring you. And I think that's a risk we run because everybody's using it to do those type of things, but if you are misrepresenting who you are, you're going to get fired. They're not going to keep you if you're not capable of doing that job. And I think that is, we have to teach kids to represent who they are. So if they're using ChatGPT all the time and they can't, make a sentence, that's a problem.
Okay, how about this one? What would you say to an educator who's nervous about the use of AI in the classroom? What would you say also to a parent who's nervous about the use of AI?
I think it's okay to be nervous. I think that's a good place to be, is a little nervous and a little cautious. I wouldn't say be fearful of it. I think you need to do your homework, do your research. Don't just take the school's word for it. Don't just take the teacher's word for it. As a parent, that's your job to find out where those boundaries are for your family and your student. And it's important to have those conversations with your kid. What does that look like in your household? What do you want them to do? What do you not want them to do? As a teacher, I think they need to know that it's out there. You're going to be fighting it. It's going to happen. It's not worth stressing yourself out all day long. Who use ChatGPT? Nobody will ever stay in education if that's what you're doing. But setting boundaries, and it's the beginning of the school year. So we spend all this time, boundaries, and these are the expectations, and this is what I want from you. Keep it real. Tell them what you expect, and tell them what the consequence is as a teacher if I find out you're using it, if I don't want you to use it, or if I allow you to use it on certain things and don't allow you to use it on other things. I think expectations go a long way.
Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
I think, as parents, one of the things I wish I did better of is just to constantly reiterate what are our family's values, So we guys, we shake hands when we meet people, and we look them in the eye, and we work really hard. And so I think when it comes to this, it's like, who are we? What kind of people are we becoming? And having those types of conversations, I think this fits in there really, really well. It's just about this one thing. I think you kind of lose the story. But if you have a story of what your family is, then I think it's going to be a lot easier to evaluate this particular area.
Nice. I think I have time for a couple more, just 2 more. Okay. Here's one that I get to ask one question. And it's this one. And this really is in reference to students and educators and kind of the relationship that they have. My question is this: what kind of social contract ought there be between students and educators in reference to AI? If there is one, what sort of, do you know what I mean by social contract? Like this kind of, agreement between the two? Like, hey, this is how we're going to approach this together. Is there a way to kind of, articulate a social contract between students and teachers? Yeah.
So I don't know specifically how that would work because there are so many different types of people out there. But I do know that the first thing that I know about people my age in school is they want to know that one, their educators do respect them, and two, their educators are not wasting their time. Because if I feel that my time is being wasted, I'm not gonna let my time be wasted. I'm gonna go ahead and let ChatGPT do that essay so I can focus on things that I want to do. So I think first things to keep in mind if you're gonna try to do that is for educators, respect and not wasting time, and things are gonna go infinitely more smooth.
I would say that, especially at FBA, two of our big things this year are respect and responsibility. And so our big push is going to be expecting the students to hold themselves to a standard of respect and responsibility, but knowing that in holding themselves accountable, if they won't do it, we will. And holding them to a level of accountability that we expect them to do their own work. If we allow ChatGPT on a project, then we will have specific grading criteria for how are you using ChatGPT. We won't be grading the work that ChatGPT produces, we will be grading your input of the prompt into ChatGPT, for example. But just the respect and responsibility, and I don't think that is just an AI issue. I think that is an issue across the board with all forms of technology and just behavior in general.
Nice. Good. All right, one question more. Let's ask this one. Now, you can go online and use ChatGPT. You don't pay for it, right, necessarily. But this question is this: nothing is offered for free. When we use ChatGPT, why is it being offered to us for free? Okay. How is it free if in reality it seems like in this world nothing is?
So actually, this is a question that I wanted to know when I first knew that I was going to be on this panel. In order to better form my opinions, I actually downloaded like 6 AI-based apps. All right, and I figured out like these things. Sure, they're being offered for free, but the ChatGPT that is being offered for free is not up to date. And like AI video generators, that's relatively new. Those you have to pay for. But AI image generators will let you generate images for free, hopefully to generate enough interest that you actually go for the other things. So for ChatGPT, you want to be up to date, especially if you're a student who wants to do some research. You know, you might want some especially up to date stuff. So it's being offered for free so that you can see what the product is and hopefully enjoy the product so much that you're willing to open up that wallet and break that piggy bank and actually pay for the premium.
Got it. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and for sure there's the premium model, and I think the other part is that whenever there's something free, you're the product, right? So what are your prompts and whether or not you like them or not, that's the thing that they're getting from you. So I think just that's true of every social media or everything that you're using. Anything that you have that's free is something that is learning something about you and trying to get you to keep doing that thing. So hopefully eventually you feel sad, you do a post, you get a like, you get a dopamine hit, you do the same thing. So every time you feel sad, you get an ad, and you go through that cycle over and over and over again. It's less clear on chat, but I think it's still learning.
Nice. Very helpful. Hey, thanks so much. You guys, can you all give it up for these panels? Great. Am I supposed to turn back over to you, or am I closing? I'm closing out. Okay, awesome. Great. Here's how I would like to close our time, is I'd like to just go to the Lord and pray over these things we talked through tonight, and just pray for us all as we engage in this process. I thank you all so much for being willing to listen and to learn here. Everybody who's online for listening, learning, and especially to you guys and ladies on this panel for just really thoughtful, helpful ways to help us move forward in our approach to AI in general and also education. So let's go to the Lord. Let's ask for His blessing as we approach these things together. Father, we are grateful to be here tonight, and we're just so thankful to be able to have conversations like this, to really come and bring things into the light, Father, that we may otherwise be sort of murky on and thinking through in kind of a dim way. To be able to talk through them really just kind of opens our eyes, our hearts, our minds, our perspectives a little bit, and gives us things to really chew on. And as we've heard from each of our panelists tonight, just the idea of taking everything according to your word and filtering that through the lenses of your truth and the gospel and all of these things that really bring, that come to bear on our decisions of how we're going to use technology and how we're going to approach it. We recognize that we're people who are very much in the midst of new and changing technologies, and so we want to be those people who wisely and cautiously engage with them and use them for your glory and for the good of your people. Father, teach us how to do that. We pray for the relationships between students and educators, for parents and all those who are engaged in this specific process when it comes to AI and research and things like this. Father, would you give them wisdom and understanding? Would you give them kindness and compassion, as we've heard tonight, as they deal with each other relationally? Father, we pray that you would indeed use this tool in mighty ways and help us to know and understand how to do that best for your glory alone. That's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, one more time, I want to definitely thank Brandy for putting this on tonight. Thank you so much, Brandy. Thank you all again for being here. I'd love for you to stick around, mingle a little bit. If you have any other specific questions, I think a couple of them might be able to hang out and talk to you. So thanks again. Anything else? Okay, awesome. Thanks.